As you can see, Rocky is fast asleep. He's had an interesting day. He's been wandering around the property. He got his parole revoked for an hour or so and had to go back to cat jail because he had disappeared into the he hadn't gone into the woods yet, but he was very close. He was moving in that direction rapidly. So he went back to cat jail for an hour or so, and then he got his parole back. And so he's a free cat now again. He's a free kitty cat man for now anyway. If he follows the rules about the woods, then he'll stay a free kitty cat man, and that's the main thing. I like for my Rocky to be free. I value freedom for all creatures, including my boy there. Especially my boy there, because I love him. Because he's my little friend, and he's really important to me. You can see I've parked the fleet of trucks for the night. I've got 2 trucks in the fleet now. I'm just moving on up, I am. Like the Jeffersons. Moving on up. Now, this saw here, this is called a ripping saw. It's for rough carpentry work. It just goes through wood like a hot knife through butter. Well, not quite that easy, but pretty easily anyway. Of course, I've been working over here, hacking away at this tree here. And anyway, with this saw, though, that I just showed you, I'll tell you a story about that. I am going to fix up this tent eventually, but for the time being, I'm just tossing stuff in there. I'm not going to worry about it too much. But I'll tell you a story about that saw. Okay, for years and years, I had a saw identical to that. Then, my cousin had a house that she rented out. It's kind of a long story, but she rented out this house that she had. And the tenants that she got in there, they didn't pay their rent, and they just destroyed the place. They smashed the doors and the walls, and they just did damage like you wouldn't believe. And they even had a dog in there that was urinating and defecating all over the place. Anyway, I went up there because I'm kind of handy. So I went up to help with the repairs so that she could put the house on the market and sell it. She decided she was done being a landlady. And so I go up there. See some of the beautiful old farm machinery here, eh? So I go up there anyway. Of course, I got a bunch of tools up there with me. And did a bunch of repairs. Well, then there was some stuff I couldn't do, like the roof needed to be redone, and there were some other things like that. So she hired a contractor to do that work. Now, this isn't anything against contractors. I know lots of contractors who are good, decent people, who work hard and are honest. So this isn't a knock against all contractors. But this particular fellow who she hired, he wasn't a very good contractor. I'll just put it that way. He wasn't very ethical, and he just wasn't a very good contractor. And what happened was, there's a beautiful tree straight ahead there. I always like to see that tree. There's just something about it. Anyway, what happened was, I had left a bunch of my tools there because I was going to be back to do some more work. So I just put them all in a closet and I left them. And this is another one I really like. A lot of character in that tree. Well, what did the contractor do? He got into my tools and scattered them all over the place, broke some of them. There we go. Broke some of them. Anyway, my saw like that, I found it laying in the backyard, all rusted out, and the handle, the plastic handle was smashed. It was all cracked up. Don't know how he did that. I had that saw for years and never broke it, but anyway, the guy had even taken her clothesline out of the backyard, and he was using her clothesline as a safety harness when he was on the roof. That's how bad it was, you know. Anyway, so I didn't have that saw anymore. That saw was just, I couldn't use it. I mean, it was completely useless. So, what did I do? I was buying scrap metal at the time at auctions. About 6 months after all that happened, I'm at an auction and I bought all the leftover stuff, because there was a lot of metal in with it. So basically anything that hadn't sold, I bought it. And I bought it all for $1. And there'd be about like a half-ton truckload of stuff there, you know. Most of it metal, most of it scrap metal. But there were tools in amongst it. So of course I'm going through, because I got to sort the scrap metal out to get the most value out of it. You know, separate the copper from the brass, from the aluminum, from the steel, and, you know, from the, you know, the shreddable steel. There's, you know, it just goes on like that. Number 2 scrap is shreddable steel. But anyway, I had to do all that. Well, what do I find in amongst that pile of stuff that I bought for $1? I'll tell you what I found. This goes to show how the universe sometimes rights itself. This saw, identical to the one that the contractor had taken and smashed and thrown into the backyard. This saw. And I really missed it too, having one of these, because this came in handy so often. Anyway, that's just the story of a time when, well, basically, somebody wronged me, really, you know, because they got into my stuff that they had no business getting into, and they smashed my stuff and everything, and they wronged me. They wronged my cousin too, actually. She ended up having to fire the guy because he was just really making a mess of her house, you know. And he was doing a lot of unethical things. So she ended up having to fire him, get somebody else to finish, somebody who actually was reliable and actually did know what they were doing. But a good contractor, which, like I say, there are plenty of good ones. You know, that fella was in the minority. I just want to make that clear. This story isn't me knocking contractors. I'm just knocking this specific individual. And I mean, an ethical contractor would have issues with a guy like that, because that's the kind of guy that gives them all a bad name. But anyway, getting back to my story, you can see how the universe, or God, or whatever force for good there is out there, I believe in God, but I think there's a force for good out there. There's a force for evil too, you know. But I think that God sometimes, or some force for good working under his direction, sometimes rights the wrongs that are done, you know. Sometimes I think that we get restored. The things we have lost get restored. In fact, I often wonder if possibly when we leave this world and go on to the next one, if we go to a good place, if we go to heaven, eventually, you know, after the judgment and so on, I often wonder if we don't get back, you know, the things that were taken from us unjustly. I do wonder that. I don't know that. It's just something I wonder about is all. I kind of hope we do, to be honest. But anyway, that's my story about the saw. And kind of a simple story, maybe a little bit of a stupid story, but I just thought it was kind of neat anyway. I couldn't believe that when I got the identical saw in that load of scrap metal. I just couldn't believe it. Anyway, that's all for now. Talk to you all later. Hope you're having a good night.